Donald Trump will be our next president, and the outcome of the most recent election has created what it always does: divisiveness. It's created strong emotion on one end of the spectrum or the other. My name is Noah. I'm a depression and anxiety survivor. I'm someone who is in recovery from alcoholism, and I've been sober for over a year. And the intention of this video is not to tell you what I think is best for you, and it's not to weigh in on politics, but I am going to share what works for me and how I process political landscape, especially during election cycles, how I work through it in a way that keeps me sound and mentally on the right path, keeps me from weighing and swaying too much that can impact my sense of wellness and my depression and my, of course, most importantly, my recovery and my sobriety. That being said, this is just an opinion piece. I don't judge you. I think you're great, regardless of who you voted for, and I mean that. I see people, not political sides. That's just how my brain works. But it didn't always. Depression survivors, we need each other. People that struggle with addiction, we need each other. People that have a history of rumination and anxiety and depersonalization, we need each other way more than we don't. And we have a lot more in common than we have different, I think. When I was younger, I have memories of being very, very excited for the election cycle based on my parents' political preferences. So I remember being really excited when a Democratic candidate won, and then watching my parents' body language and being very mad when a Republican Party member won. And this just oscillated back and forth all throughout my childhood. Never investigated anything for myself, but I loved my parents and they were passionate Democrats. And so I was a passionate, soon to be Democrat. And I still remember being really excited though when my party member won. And I remember being angry, to whatever degree a kid can be angry from a political standpoint, when my party member lost. I'm not proud of this because I just don't think this is good. But I was someone who with my buddies would go around pulling down other people's signs for their Republican Party member. So it was really, really cool and in where I'm from, Portland, Oregon, to cut up and rip up George Bush signs, for example. And then anytime I would do that, they would come back threefold or whatever. But I felt like I was a part of something. It felt really good. It felt good to be better than something or someone. And as a Democrat, I back then, I did feel better than Republicans, for whatever that's worth. And it felt good. It felt good to be better than someone. Took the spotlight off of my own shortcomings, let's say. I also remember when Barack Obama won and being so excited the world was finally going to be okay and everything would be saved and everything would be wonderful. And I took to the streets and I posted on social media, and I remember being really outspoken and, let's just say, less than kind to anyone that didn't vote for Barack Obama. And it was easy to be a Democrat in Portland, Oregon, because we're a blue state historically, and I imagine forever. Who knows? But it felt good, right? I felt good. Now, as I've gotten older, I have experienced tons of mental health issues. And to that effect, politics, in my experience, have never positively, directly impacted my day-to-day mental health experience or my day-to-day addiction issue experience. But I do know that in recent years, it has been more risky for me to engage in volatile political behavior with other people. When Donald Trump was first elected, I was in rehab, and I remember being in there, and I remember the anger that some people were experiencing and expressing. And I remember being a part of it a little bit, that anger. And I think as I've gotten older, I've noticed that my personal threshold to deal with anger, especially what I might consider for me personally self-righteous anger, my threshold has gotten smaller or more narrow. How would you describe threshold? I can't handle anger as well as I used to, and I can't handle resentment as well as I used to. And I know from my experience being in and out of rehabs, in and out of psych wards, and then coming face to face with my own shortcomings as a person, I know I can't handle resentment very well anymore. It's just not good for my mental health. and especially coming face to face with how fallible I am, and just this acute realization that I'm so very broken, right alongside with being so very worth it and all of those things, if that makes sense. When I got out of rehab after the election cycle that saw Donald Trump become the president, I remember staying sober for a time, and then I eventually drank again. And when I drank again, I really struggled to deal with other people's opinions politically. It made me uncomfortable, whichever side of the aisle I was. I was a lifelong Democrat, convinced that all Republicans were bad per se, with no sense of what that even meant. And then as I got older, I started wondering what I believed and why I believed it, and thinking about it and doing research, and then getting very confused, finding out that there were some, let's just say, policy stuff or aspects of conservative politics that I kind of related to as I got older. And then I felt bad and felt confused about that. And then I noticed a lot of my Democratic friends who were very outspoken could be pretty mean and hurtful and angry and very condescending towards anyone who wasn't a liberal, let's say. But then I started to notice that there was a lot of condescending, mean, and ugly behavior from the conservative side of the aisle. And all of this led to me not feeling good. All of this led to me feeling a rush of confusion and emotion when it came to the political landscape. And as it pertains to my mental health, it wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for me on a number of levels. And as I finally, as a grown-up, started to explore what I thought and what mattered to me and what was important to me, anytime I would get conflicted or constricted, or anytime I started taking other people's opinions personal, it was fodder for alcoholism for me. It was fuel for depression and anxiety. It was fuel for being in a triggered state. And it was really, really good fuel for creating a victim mentality for me. I have memories of learning things that I'd never looked at from the conservative side, and memorizing data and talking points just so my liberal friends, if they were to ask me what I thought about something, I would have information to validate that I wasn't a bad person, and that this made sense, and this is why I thought it made sense, and I needed to prove to them that I wasn't a bad person. And what's weird is I have memories of being younger on the Democratic side of things, when I was blindly Democratic, let's say, wanting to have talking points for the Republican side of things, to make sure that they understood where I was coming from, and I policed people's speech and I judged them, and I felt this whole thing, and ultimately it led to me not doing so well, and it led to me not feeling good enough one way or another, and it led to me being upset with other people easily, and it led to me to being afraid of other people and finding differences in other people, and ultimately feeling triggered and anxious and angry and shut down. And when I'm in that space where I'm A, needing validation or approval from others, or B, not focusing on the things I can control and then focusing on what's right in front of me in my life, I am prone to fall into sadness, despair, depression, and anxiety. And back in the day, not so long ago, my solution to that sort of thing was alcohol. It just made me feel better for a time, and then it wouldn't work. It never ended up working. I would treat my anger with alcohol. I would treat my confusion or my insecurity with alcohol. I would treat my my judgment of others based on their political beliefs with alcohol or whatever. Never felt right, never worked for me. And this last time, luckily it was between election cycles, so I had some chance to process. But this last time being out as a drinker and then getting sober, I really took stock and inventory of myself and my life, trying to be objective. What has worked? What hasn't worked? What have I been doing that's not serving me? And what might I learn on how to live a better life? And keep first things first, which for me is to stay sober and to stay mentally and emotionally sober, and be mindful of the fact that I have a history of depression and anxiety, and that I can ill afford this sort of anger or this confusion or this annoyance or this sense that something is happening to me as my understanding of politics has oscillated. Be more mindful that I'm very sensitive and I need to protect that, in that regardless of which candidate and which party is elected. I'm a human being who needs to know how to interact with the world in a peaceful, loving, and reasonable way, no matter what. Because if I don't, I get depressed. If I don't, I end up drinking. I don't have the leeway and the bandwidth that some people perhaps do. I just don't. And so going into this election cycle, of course, I knew that it would be the same as it always is. It would be doomsday one way or another, depending on who got elected. So I made a few decisions within myself, being more mindful of myself. I was not going to be engaging in any political conversations, no matter what, because I can see, honestly, healthy arguments from both sides of the aisle. I think I've always been able to do that, but been afraid to say, I think that kind of makes sense, or I think that kind of makes sense, or explore what I think that means. But I decided I wasn't going to engage in political conversation, no matter what, because it might put me in a perspective that I needed to validate myself and prove myself to others, which is dangerous for me. I decided that I would not engage in online social media politics. I unfollowed everyone from every side of the aisle, no matter what. And I blocked on Instagram, all of those things, not because I'm bigger or better or above it, not because I don't think that this does have some weight, or of course there aren't ramifications on policy and how it impacts some people. It's not that. It's a healthy selfishness that I had to adopt for myself to stay sober. It's a decision that I had to make that I thought superseded every other part of me, especially the more unchecked part of me that needed to be in the right and needed to know what was going on and wanted to feel smart and educated and informed. All of that ego stuff for me was dangerous, and I think I finally get that. I'm not well built and well suited to be an activist politically. I have my own beliefs that I'm learning about, and I have every right to participate privately in whatever I think might be best based on my life and my upbringing and my influences and my education, right? But as far as like being a soundboard for it, I'm not cut out for it as a depression survivor. I'm not cut out for it as a recovering alcoholic. I very much need people. Like, I need you. I need to connect with others. I need to find common ground with everyone. I have been taught and I've come to believe that I have far more in common with people than I do different with people if I get to know them well enough and we get down to deeper and more meaningful day-to-day connection stuff. This helps me stay sober. This keeps me from being angry at other people who I don't actually know and whose lives I don't fully understand. This helps me from taking it personal when someone looks at me and makes decisions about me that I can't control, that maybe I don't think are fair, or that make me nervous or insecure about myself. To approach politics in that regard, to have not looked at anything or engaged in any conversation, even with friends, to have been completely insulated from it by choice, it was so incredibly peaceful because I need to control the things that I actually can control. And my day-to-day life has never and will never, ever be changed by whoever is in office on any given election cycle. My experience proves it for me personally. It's never changed me needing to know how to live my life and get out of bed and clean my room and learn about my adult responsibilities and manage my emotions and try to be a good friend and a husband and partake in health and self-care and service and recovery. It's never changed those things for me personally. And anytime I start thinking that whoever gets elected is going to make my life better or worse, and if the wrong person's elected, everything's not going to be okay, it's very, very risky for my mental health and for my sobriety. So election night for me personally came and went, and it was completely fine. And I feel just as stable and calm and collected as I did before, as I did after, and it made no difference to me who won in that regard, not even a little bit. I couldn't have cared less in that respect. Now, I don't say that also from some sort of platitude of grandiosity, like, oh, look, I'm not impacted by who's elected. It's not what this is for me at all. If you genuinely are hurt or moved to feel whatever you feel, please do. I am aiming to not judge a soul because I don't want others to judge me because I'm only human and I'm very broken. So feel your feelings, do your thing. But this is the attitude and the mindset that has best served me this time around. And I really feel good about it. I have libertarian friends, Democratic friends, Republican friends, and people that sincerely don't participate in politics. They don't vote. They don't want to talk about it. They don't care. I have friends in every walk of life, and some of the best people I personally know come from very different backgrounds, but have so much more in common than they have different, and support each other anyway. And that's just where I live, and that's what's best for me in the spirit of staying sober and in the spirit of staying right-sized and just learning how to live life and feel okay in my own skin. That's what's been working for me. The hope, again, for this video was for it to help you, and I'm going to finish with a story. When I was in rehab for 5 months back in 2020, I think it was 2020. So COVID was just happening. The political landscape was very tense. The social justice movement was very, very aggressive and riled up, and understandably so. And tensions were high amongst us as people, and division, as seems to be the case in cycles, was very noticeable. And in my rehab, we had two guys who couldn't have been more different. One was a 45-year-old lifelong Republican from the country, just grew up with those sort of conservative values, and that's the way he rolled. And then the next was a 19-year-old, rest in peace, Frankie, 19-year-old kid born and raised in Portland, and very much inculcated in democratic values and liberal values and relative extremism kind of from both of them. And they at first thought they hated each other because of this. But addiction is the great equalizer. And I think depression can be too, because I've been a part of depression support groups where people come from all walks of life. When you're horribly addicted and a substance has your number and it brings you to your knees the way alcohol brought me to my knees, it makes all the noise and all of everything else soften and quiet, and it really makes you realize you need people and that you don't know what's best and you're lost and you're broken and you need help. These two that went into that treatment program, wildly different, came out incredibly close, because it didn't take long to realize that beyond the posturing and the talking points and the shotgun blasting of political views, beyond the standing your ground for what you believe in on these big abstract ways, were two people that desperately needed one another to go, are you okay today? I noticed you're sad. Anything I can do to support you? You see one of your boys in rehab crying. You might think you don't even like the guy, and you see him crying and you know what they're going through because you're going through it too. You're just drawn to them and you want to support them because you're going to have your day in rehab where you're broken, you can't do this anymore, maybe you're triggered, maybe you want to relapse, or you think you want to use again or drink, and you're scared, and suddenly the other guy who has different political views or religious views sees you hurting, and they remember that, oh, I'm an addict too, I'm an alcoholic too, or I'm a depression survivor too. We need each other. I don't want you to relapse because I don't want to relapse. I don't want you to fail because I don't want to fail. That sort of thing always trumped everything, no pun intended there. And those two left treatment incredibly close. It was a beautiful thing to see. It was very interesting and instructive for me to see. So thank you for letting me process. I didn't know I was going to make this video until now. Leave me a comment. Oh Lord, leave me a comment and tell me if you relate or can understand anything I've said, but I will be taking out really volatile comments if that's the case. That's not what I want this video to be. If you'd like to schedule an appointment to talk with me, first link in the description, you can do that. And just know that I appreciate you and that I don't think I'm right. I'm just learning what works best for me. I'm just sharing openly my experience. I also don't think there's anything bad or wrong about you, regardless of what your beliefs are and your education has been and your upbringing has been and what's led you to feel and think the way you feel. I see you, I hear you, you're okay. There's nothing bad or wrong about you in my book. I believe I've got more in common with you than I have different, that's for sure. And I appreciate you. And I need you. So that's my video. Thank you for listening. I hope you receive it in the way it was intended, and I hope you come back and spend some time with me. And I hope you're doing well with your mental health journey and your recovery journey if you happen to be someone like me who struggles with addiction. Okie dokie, 20-minute video. Nailed it. I'll see you guys soon.